this video, we're continuing the construction of our recruitment pipeline. So just a bit of a recap. We are creating this unpublished candidate pipeline for our generic onboarding jobs. By way of a recap, we created our stages and we attached the various forms that we want to have completed on each of the stages as the candidate is assigned to it. We had registration, phone screen, interview, reference, induction. In the second video, we then discussed the creation of our first assessment form, a registration application, the names synonymous with each other. And you recall that we created the various questions that we want to be answered by the candidate when they first register. And depending on the responses to questions, we had some actions that were going to happen automatically, such as flagging because they have allergies, making sure they get the minimum number of referees, depending on how long they've been with the last employer, capturing passport and date of birth, because if they say they're not an Australian citizen, we want to automate a visa check, and to do so we need to have information about passport and date of birth. And then finally we set the preferences on our assessment to say we want it presented in standard view, which is the default view when a candidate is going to be accessing the system and likely completing their forms on their mobile phone. So now one of the things that we want to do is, we've talked about it in the past, is about reviewing an assessment. So if we go back to our recruitment and we go to our pipeline, I open up my stage and now I click on the candidate registration form. Here I'm able to specify further actions that will happen for this registration. And you can see here that I'll just close this out, but you can see here that for the position we said who's going to review it. We've said the recruitment consultant. So that's the concept of the reviewer. And you recall in the previous video we talked about assisters and so forth, and that this really was the link back to the org chart, because the system will look, well, who is employed as a recruitment consultant, and even if it's one or more, each of them will be assigned a task to review this this registration. And when they when they've reviewed the registration, we want that reviewer to decide what is going to happen next on the basis of that review. And to do that, we use what we call review questions. So I'm going to go back to my notification template, open up the assessment review. I'm going to edit this. And on the very last question, this one here, we're going to see reviewer. You can actually specify a reviewer question for each question you ask of the candidate. But typically in this stage, what we're doing is we're saying, review the assessment and decide the next actions. So, so we say here, determine next stage for this candidate. Mandatory. Now, in fact, I just want to introduce you to another option here. Instead of determine next stage for this candidate, use responder. So what happens is when the question is created and the reviewer has opened it up and is going to respond and create their review, it won't go determine next stage for this candidate now. It'll say determine next stage for, I'll take that, Brian. So it just brings a little bit of personality to the process, and focuses the reviewer a little bit more that there's a person on the end of the chain. So you can use that. You can use that merge item anywhere where you're defining questions. So you might even say, for example, responder first name, in other words, Brian, please request a code be sent to your mobile phone. So you can really personalize these assessments, and they're often a good idea because it makes everyone forget that it's quite a dry process and adds a bit of personality to it. So determine the next stage. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're now going to have a different kind of response called options. Now, the various stages of the pipeline that we can take them through, we've talked about it. It's I'll just write them down here. They can either go to phone screen, So you can assess them, go to phone screen, go to arrange interview. These are stages in the pipeline. We want to do a reference check. Maybe take them straight to Maybe take them straight to induction. Or after a review, determine that they are unsuccessful. I also like to bold these items. I think, as I said before, they stand out better on the mobile phone when the screen's not very large and the type can be a little small. Right, so what we've done, those are the options that the responder is going to be able to click, the reviewer is going to be able to select from. Then how we link it to the pipeline is through our next steps. So you recall when we were creating our questions before on this, we were sort of asking secondary questions. Notice we could directly reject them. What we're going to do here is we're going to move them to a status. So we're going to move them to the phone screen status. Arrange interview, we're going to move them to the arrange interview status. Reference check. Induction. Finally unsuccessful. So as soon as the candidate has completed their questions and responded and multi-factor authenticated as the last question, they're able to save their application registration as done. A task is going to be created for any individual that is holding the role of head office recruitment consultant, and then that task will be assigned to the individuals who, as I said, whoever's holding that position will be assigned the task, and then they will open that task and they'll be presented with the assessment that's been completed by the candidate, and they will then select, after reviewing that, they will make their selection of which stage that candidate is then to be taken to. So that's the concept of reviews. So we covered two things. We can create the review questions, we can point them to different places in the workflow as a result of the responses, but we can also determine which positions are going to be asked to review that. And we did that when we managed the attachment of the assessment in the pipeline. Finally, so the next stage we're going to do to complete this first part of this process is create an email that will be sent to the candidate when they arrive in the candidate registration stage. We're going to do that in our next video. We're going to do so by coming into the notification areas and defining the various notifications. So we're going to define one of those in our next video. But just as a recap, we've now got our pipeline. Here we've got our registration form. We've created the registration form with our 12 questions. We have identified that that template, when it's completed by the candidates, is going to be reviewed by the head office consultant, and we've provided the questions that the head office consultant will respond to automate the candidate through to the next stages as a result of that review. Thank you very much.